I'd been driving for 2 hours toward the Marriott in Baltimore, where Brooke was attending a conference. The plan was to surprise her, take her out for a nice dinner, or at least that was my excuse. For 3 months now, a nagging suspicion had been eating away at me that Brooke, my wife of 14 years, might be cheating with one of her colleagues. Every time she left for a business trip or conference, the unease grew. Tonight, I was determined to get to the bottom of it, whatever it took. Brooke and I have 2 wonderful kids, Paige, 12, and Mason, 10. They were spending the night with my mom, freeing me up to make this trip. We had married young, right after high school, after dating for 2 years. She was full of energy, her brown hair long, and she had a naturally slim build with striking features. For most of our marriage, I felt solid in our relationship. But recently things seemed off. Small, subtle changes that were hard to pinpoint. I hadn't confronted her, mostly out of fear. She'd dismiss it as jealousy or paranoia. Since Baltimore wasn't far, I figured I'd drop in unexpectedly and finally see if my worries had any weight. I approached the counter, my suit bag slung over my shoulder. "Hi, I'm Troy Langston. My wife Brooke is here for the insurance conference in room 214. She mentioned I could pick up a key." The receptionist checked, then nodded, retrieving a key. "May I see some ID, please?" "Of course. Good to see they're careful about this," I said, handing over my license. My heart was pounding as I stepped into the elevator, questions whirling in my head. How would I handle it if my suspicions were confirmed? Would I confront her? And what if I was wrong? I wasn't sure whether I'd knock or just open the door. Every option was racing through my mind. Reaching the room, I slipped the key card into the lock, pushed the door quietly, and stepped inside. There she was, sitting at the desk with her briefcase open, engrossed in paperwork. She turned, startled. "Troy, you nearly gave me a heart attack. What are you doing here?" "Just thought I'd surprise you, maybe take you out for dinner," I replied, trying to sound casual. Her face lit up, and she came over to kiss me. "That sounds great. You're staying the night, right? I could really use some company." With that kiss, my plan to catch her red-handed seemed completely out of place. "How about a little time together before dinner?" I joked, hopeful. She laughed, shaking her head. "Let me take a shower first. But I'll tell you what, how about a little something before I hop in? After dinner, we'll have all night." Brooke was soon undressing, tossing her clothes aside. She always had her own way of keeping things interesting, and it was one of those moments that reminded me why I fell for her. The sensation was unmistakable, and all my doubts began to fade. We shared an intimate moment that reminded me of our early years. When she finally pulled away, her eyes sparkled. "That should hold you over until we eat," she teased, heading to the bathroom. I sat back on the bed, half grinning, half dazed. As she showered, I wandered over to the dresser, looking for an aspirin for my lingering headache. Opening her toiletry bag, I didn't find any pills, but in the side pocket, my hand brushed against something unexpected. A pack of 6 condoms. I slowly pulled them out, staring in disbelief as I sat back down on the bed. After Mason was born, Brooke had tried birth control pills, but they made her sick. We decided a vasectomy would be easier, so I went ahead with it. Since then, we hadn't needed any birth control. No pills, no condoms, just freedom. So, seeing a pack of them in her toiletry bag now, of all times, felt like a punch to the gut. I wasn't oblivious. It didn't take long to realize the truth. Brooke was likely cheating. But now, I was at a loss for what to do next. Looking through her bag, I noticed a few safety pins she kept for small clothing fixes. In a quiet rage, I took one, carefully poked holes through each of the condoms, and put them back just as I'd found them. She was still in the shower when I stepped out into the hallway and called my friend Joel. "Hey, Troy! What's up?" "Joel, I need a favor." "Sure thing. What do you need?" "About an hour from now, call my cell and tell me a pipe burst at the school, and I need to come in right away. Just call, and I'll handle the rest." "Got it. Call you around 7. As I hung up, I knew staying here tonight wasn't an option. The idea of another intimate moment with Brooke after what I'd found was too much. I needed time to think. When Brooke finally came out of the shower, all I wanted to do was confront her, to demand answers. But I took a deep breath, reminding myself that losing control wouldn't help anything right now. If I could keep quiet, I might find a way to get through this. By the time we reached the dining room, my mood was bleak. "Order anything you like, Troy. I can expense it." I tried to keep up appearances, though my appetite had vanished. "I'll go for the small fillet, not that hungry." That works for me too, she replied. How about a bottle of rosé? After the waiter left with our orders, I couldn't resist probing. Brooke, are you really happy with everything? Our life, the way things are? Of course! I've got a lovely home, 2 great kids, and a husband who loves me. What more could I want? I don't know. Sometimes I just wonder if I'm doing enough, if you're really content, I said, feeling the weight of my words. Oh, you're such a softie, she laughed. That's why you came all the way down here to see me. Honestly, you have nothing to worry about. I'm happy. You're everything I could ask for. We chatted about trivial things as we ate, though my mind was 1,000 miles away. Just as we were finishing up, my cell buzzed. I excused myself to the lobby to take Joel's call, where he confirmed our cover story. A few minutes later, I went back in. That was Joel. There's a water pipe break at the school, so I need to head back and help out. I'm sorry to bail on tonight. Brooke looked disappointed, though I couldn't tell if it was genuine. Regardless, my leaving didn't change much. One way or another, she'd have her evening. As we stepped onto the elevator, her colleague Ray Goodwin was getting off. He was the co-worker Brooke often traveled with. Oh hey, Brooke, Ray said, nodding. I stopped by to see if you wanted dinner, but I see why you didn't answer. And you must be Troy. He extended a hand. Ray Goodwin. Brooke mentions you all the time. Ray, this is Troy. He's heading back for an emergency, she explained, adding lightly. Guess I'll be sleeping solo again tonight. As we rode up, I couldn't resist bringing up the issue that had been gnawing at me. Brooke, I wish you'd consider stepping away from this job. And honestly, it would give me peace of mind if you didn't work with Ray. Troy, I told you, I have no intention of quitting. I like my job, and I've learned a lot from Ray. You've got to get past this paranoia about him. Back in the room, she gave me a brief kiss goodbye before I gathered my things and left. On the drive home, all I could think about was Ray going to her room after dinner. By the time I walked through our front door, I was in pieces, angry and exhausted. I'd begun to resent my wife for what she was putting me through. I wished I were one of those guys who could come up with clever ways to catch a cheating spouse, but I felt completely out of my depth. What could I really do? Even trying to avoid intimacy was a struggle. I wanted a divorce, yet I didn't have enough hard evidence to justify it. My wife was cheating. I knew it, but I felt powerless to do anything. I wasn't about to tolerate it, but I needed help. When Brooke came home 2 days later, she looked carefree, practically glowing. She clearly had a great time, which only added to my anger. Checking her bag, I saw only 1 condom left, still with a pinhole. That night, any physical connection with her felt like a duty more than anything else. Saturday came, and so did the annual company picnic for Argus Insurance. At least the kids would have something fun to do, though I was dreading the event. Part of me couldn't shake the feeling that some people there knew about the affair, and I didn't want to be the target of whispered jokes or knowing glances. While Brooke chatted enthusiastically around the picnic grounds, especially with Ray, I kept a low profile. They weren't obviously flirting, but it was clear they were close. I wasn't exactly included, which was fine with me. Hi, I'm Kara Goodwin. You must be Troy Langston. She was stunning. Long auburn hair, striking blue eyes, and a picture-perfect figure, though on the petite side, I was caught off guard. Why would Ray even think of cheating on someone like her? Oh, I'm sorry. Got lost in thought for a moment. It's nice to meet you. Could we find somewhere to talk? Somewhere away from the crowd? Sure, I nodded. Let's take a walk down by the lake. I doubt anyone will miss me. Same here. We wandered to a quiet spot by the water, settling onto a bench where the lake spread out in front of us. All right, what's on your mind? I asked. Kara hesitated, clearly struggling to begin. This isn't easy for me. I'm not exactly sure how to start. It's a delicate matter. Right then, I knew she was aware of the affair. I decided to cut straight to it. You're talking about the affair between Ray and my wife, right? I just found out recently. She looked relieved. I've known for a couple of months. I'm preparing to file for divorce, but I could use some help. I hired a private investigator, but my lawyer says I'll have a stronger case if Brooke would testify, or at least sign a notarized statement acknowledging the affair. What kind of evidence do you have? Photos, recorded calls, dates, and times? No video yet, but the photos are pretty telling. I'm willing to help however I can. Could your lawyer also help me file for divorce? Having access to some of your evidence would really help since I don't have anything concrete myself. I'm also planning to sue Argus. I have proof that certain managers knew about the affair and did nothing to stop it. They'll have to decide. Either fire both of them or face a lawsuit. Wow, that's impressive. Ray's out golfing tomorrow morning. Could you stop by mid-morning? He won't be back until late afternoon. I can show you the evidence I have, and we can see if there's anything else we might do. I'm at 142 Willow Street in Crestmont. Sounds good. Let's call it a meeting then, I said with a chuckle, and we both shared a quick laugh. Talking to Kara felt oddly reassuring. We walked back to the picnic area, and it seemed like no one had even noticed we were gone. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope that there might be a way through this. As expected, the next morning, Brooke announced she'd be out shopping for a few hours. After she left, I dropped the kids off at my mom's and headed over to Crestmont. Kara welcomed me at the door, and we headed to her den. Inside was a comfortable leather couch and a large monitor on the table in front of it, displaying a picture of an empty hotel room. She gestured for me to sit. Would you like a drink? I've got beer, soda, and wine. A soda is fine. So, you've got my full attention, Kara. Mind telling me what this is all about? Well, in a few minutes, we're going to catch my husband Ray in action on the golf course, Kara said with a dry smile, though I have a feeling you'll recognize his caddy pretty quickly. How did you manage to set this up? I asked, impressed. It cost me about $1,400 to get everything ready. I figured Ray could foot the bill when all is said and done. The feed should run for around 2 hours, so let's get comfortable. I've got popcorn and nachos if you're interested. Oh, and afterward, I'll have a recording of the whole thing. Happy to give you a copy. Not exactly something I want to see, but there's no way I'm missing this either, I replied, preparing myself for the inevitable. We chatted a bit while waiting. Kara showed me the evidence she'd collected, and I was stunned by the thoroughness. Photos, audio recordings, documents. She had gathered it all. While I was grateful to see the truth laid out, it was also a bitter confirmation of Brooke's betrayal. In the meantime, Kara shared a little about her home, including 3 large koi ponds in her backyard. I asked if I could bring my kids over sometime to see them, and she seemed genuinely pleased at the idea, inviting us whenever we liked. Then, we turned our attention back to the monitor as the screen lit up with activity. As she had predicted, Ray and Brooke appeared on the screen, entering a room and immediately discarding any small talk as they settled onto the bed. While the sound was muffled, the visuals spoke volumes. I felt a little uneasy sitting there next to Kara, watching this unfold. Well, that's not something you see every day, Kara commented, breaking the tension with a smirk. I gave a half-hearted smile, not quite sure how to respond, still processing the surreal situation. The camera angle shifted as they continued, showing a flurry of motion. The scene was clear evidence of their closeness, and while I could barely believe what I was watching, it left me feeling a strange mix of anger and disbelief. Brooke seemed completely at ease, her face betraying none of the guilt or hesitation I would have expected. At one point, I cleared my throat, uncomfortable with the scene. Kara, sorry to cut in, but do we really have to see all of this? I take it this isn't something you're up for watching? She replied, glancing over with an understanding look. Not really, I admitted. Watching my wife with someone else isn't exactly what I'd call comfortable, especially here with you. Kara nodded. That's completely fair. We have everything we need recorded for the lawyers anyway, so we don't have to keep watching. Honestly, I wasn't finding it enjoyable either. Let's just say I think I've got the plot figured out. Are you planning to head home now? Well, I replied, actually, I was hoping you could show me those koi ponds of yours. I think that'd be a lot more enjoyable than watching, well, this. Her face lit up at my interest. She stood up and led me to the back of the house, and as we walked, I heard faint sounds from the monitor inside, reminding me of the stark contrast in how Brooke and I were spending our day. The ponds were beautiful, and I was fascinated by the intricate pumping and filtration systems. My plumbing background made it especially interesting, and I could tell Kara appreciated having someone to share it with. Ray hadn't shown any interest in her hobby, leaving her to hire others to manage the maintenance. I offered to help any time Ray was out on the golf course. My interest in the koi ponds was genuine, though spending time with Kara was certainly an added bonus. After a few hours, which went by far too quickly, we went back inside. The screen was blank now, indicating the motel room was empty again, so I decided to call it a day. Kara promised to let me know when Ray's next golf day was so I could bring Paige and Mason to see the fish. The following weeks were difficult. Each time Brooke took a shower, I checked her bag, noticing she always seemed to have a fresh supply of condoms. I couldn't figure out when she was using them, but I kept a safety pin on my keychain to poke holes in each pack she brought home, just in case. Occasionally, after visiting Kara's house, the kids would eagerly tell Brooke about the koi lady, sharing their drawings and talking about the fish names they'd made up. Brooke seemed uninterested and didn't connect that the koi lady was actually Ray's wife. She only seemed relieved that the kids were occupied while she was away. Twice I asked Brooke to consider leaving her job and ending her association with Ray. Both times, she refused, and by the second, her response was harsh. I started making excuses to avoid intimacy, which only led to her throwing a few cutting remarks about my lack of interest. It stung a bit, but it also made it easier to stick to my plan. Finally, on a Tuesday night, she brought it up. "Troy, I've been feeling so stressed lately. I'd like to take a few days off work and spend about a week at my sister's to unwind. Do you think you could handle the kids while I recharge?" I kept a neutral face. "I get it. You've been working long hours. A little time off might be just what you need. Going to your sister's is a much better idea than getting overwhelmed. Go ahead and take a break. I'll keep everything running here." She smiled, relieved. "Thanks for understanding. I know all this extra work is supposed to be for the family, but maybe I overdid it." That night, sleep didn't come easily as I thought about the steps I needed to take. The timing was finally falling into place. Brooke's sister, Nadine, and her husband, John, lived about 3 hours away. John was an okay guy, but didn't stand up much for himself. If Nadine wanted something, he made it happen without question. The town they lived in had 2 clinics, which I'd already researched thoroughly. I knew the names, locations, and operational details of both. Each required a mandatory waiting period of 2 days, meaning Brooke's earliest possible appointment would be Friday if she started the process on Wednesday. I was confident she'd want it all handled quickly to have a few days to recover before returning home. This gave me a day and a half to set my plans in motion. After Brooke left for her rest and recuperation trip, I began putting everything in place. The first step was explaining the situation to my parents. Admitting that I'd failed as a husband was tough, but they understood and offered their support. The kids enjoyed their time with them, and Dad's truck would come in handy for moving Brooke's belongings. My lawyer had prepared the paperwork, ready for me to collect on Thursday morning. Kara's documents were also in order, and she planned to serve Ray at the same time I'd serve Brooke. Part of me still felt I should give Brooke one final chance to make things right, though I didn't have much hope. Dad and I spent the rest of the day packing Brooke's things, staying busy and focused on the task at hand. Thursday morning, after a 3-hour drive, I arrived at the first clinic on my list. But that was a dead end. That left only one more option, a place called the Family Planning Center. Approaching the receptionist, I tried to look as calm as possible. "Hi, my name is Troy Langston. My wife, Brooke, said I needed to come in to sign a consent form." "Which form exactly?" she asked, looking up. "I'm not sure of the exact name," I said, keeping my tone steady. "It's supposed to confirm that I understand what's happening and agree to it, so I won't bring any legal action." "One moment. Brooke Langston, correct?" "Yes." "Do you need any ID?" She shook her head, clicking away on her computer before nodding. "Her sister signed for her, but your signature would be preferable." "Let me grab the file." Jackpot. Just needed to hold it together a little longer. She set the form in front of me, asking me to sign just below Nadine's signature. I noted the scheduled procedure for Friday morning at 11, with a request to arrive an hour early. "Is there anything else to pay on this?" I asked, pulling out my checkbook. "No, your wife paid in full, $800 in cash. Nothing more is due at this time." "Thank you so much. This helps a lot." When I arrived at Nadine and John's place, the welcome was so warm it felt comically forced. "Troy, what a wonderful surprise. What brings you here?" Brooke asked, her smile just a little too bright. "Well, Mom and Dad offered to keep the kids for a few days, so I took some time off and decided to come down. Guess you could say I needed a little break myself." The room went quiet for a moment as I watched them all process the situation. I'd caught them off guard, and now they had to scramble to adjust. After a moment, I noticed Nadine signaling to John, and they both headed to the kitchen. Brooke tried to keep up light conversation, sticking to safe topics. John returned shortly after. "Troy, I've got a great idea. I can take the day off tomorrow, and we'll borrow my buddy Jack's bass boat. We could head out early and spend the day on the lake, just us guys. What do you say?" "That sounds perfect," I replied, nodding. "A day out on the lake would do me good. See if Jack can join us too." "Great, I'll make the arrangements." Everyone seemed visibly relieved, happy that things had smoothed over. Dinner was uneventful, with small talk filling the rest of the evening. Of course, there was no intimacy between Brooke and me that night. She didn't want her sister overhearing anything. Early the next morning, Jack pulled up with the boat, while John packed the cooler with drinks and food. We chatted as we loaded up. "Ready to hop in?" John asked, holding the passenger door open. "No, John," I said, stepping back. "I decided not to go after all. I'd suggest you guys take your time out there today. You probably won't want to face Nadine for the next few hours." John spent a solid 5 minutes trying to persuade me to join them, until I finally had to lay it out clearly. After a few pointed words and a couple of less than friendly suggestions, John and Jack finally took off, leaving me to handle the day my own way. I headed back inside, poured myself a cup of coffee, found Nadine's cell phone, and switched it off. Then, I picked up the landline and gave Dad a call. He was always up early. We talked for about 2 hours, and during that time, the call waiting chimed in at least 6 times. John had clearly been trying to reach Nadine, but after a while he gave up. Eventually, I heard the sounds of Nadine and Brooke stirring upstairs, so I ended the call with Dad and braced myself for the inevitable confrontation. After clearing out the missed calls on the landline, I turned Nadine's phone back on. Brooke and Nadine had about 2 hours to reach the clinic, plenty of time for them to feel the frustration of my surprise visit. I finished the first pot of coffee, then brewed a fresh one just as Brooke came down. "Troy, what are you doing here?" she asked, taken aback. "I decided against the fishing trip and thought I'd just hang around here with you two today," I replied smoothly. "Thought we could go somewhere nice for lunch. I'll be heading back tonight anyway, so I didn't want to waste the day stuck on a boat." No, that won't work. Nadine and I already had plans today. I see you all the time, Troy, but I only get to spend time with Nadine a couple of times a year. "You'll be here all week, Brooke. You could spare at least half a day for me since I drove all the way down here. You've got the whole week for time with Nadine." Nadine picked up her cell phone and hurried out of the room, dialing as she went. Brooke slumped in her chair, looking like the wind had been knocked out of her. We both overheard Nadine in the next room, yelling at John as if he'd broken some sacred code. I felt a little sorry for the guy, but he'd married her. "Troy, listen," Brooke began, trying to keep her composure. "Nadine and I really want today to ourselves. I'd rather you didn't tag along." "Fine, just tell me what you two are planning, and I'll see if I can find something else to do. You have a whole week here. I only have today. You're not meeting up with anyone, are you?" "No, we're not meeting anyone," she snapped. "We were going to do some shopping for, well, personal things, underwear, lingerie, nightgowns. It's the kind of shopping we'd rather do without anyone around, especially not you guys. Most of those stores are in the mall. I can keep myself occupied while you're in the fitting rooms," I said, staying calm. "I'll stay out of your way, and when it's lunchtime, I'll treat you both to something nice to make up for the trouble." Nadine appeared in the doorway, shooting me a glare, but remained silent. Realizing that her arguments weren't getting anywhere, Brooke reluctantly agreed and stood up. "All right, I'll go get dressed," she said, heading upstairs. Nadine threw one last sharp look at me and followed her sister. 20 minutes later, I noticed the landline phone light up, indicating a call. My guess was they were rescheduling the clinic appointment, likely trying to wait until I'd left. I wasn't trying to prevent Brooke from going through with her decision. I just wanted to make it as inconvenient as possible. About 20 minutes after that, both of them came back downstairs. "All right, Troy, let's go shopping," Brooke said, her tone sharp. It was easier than I'd expected. They must have decided that rescheduling for after I left was their best option. I wasn't standing in their way completely, just adding a bit of complication. I insisted on driving, determined to keep control and avoid any chance of them ditching me along the way. A few miles from the house, I pulled into a service station and took my time. I filled the tank, checked the oil and water, even cleaned the windshield, more attention than I'd ever given my car. Meanwhile, Brooke and Nadine just sat there, clearly irritated. At the mall, I parked farther out than usual, making sure we had a nice long walk. Once inside, I gave them space, keeping an eye on them but letting them go about their business. They weren't exactly enjoying themselves. Most of their time was spent talking and making discreet gestures. They bought a few items, probably just to keep up appearances, but it was clear their minds were elsewhere. I kept my distance but kept them in view. By the time their scheduled appointment had passed, I knew I'd managed to delay them. I had no intentions of interfering further. I knew she'd eventually follow through anyway. Just after noon, they returned to the center court of the mall, where I'd arranged to meet them. We headed to the Olive Garden for a quick lunch, then returned to the house around 2 in the afternoon. The drive back was quiet, with little conversation. I couldn't help but smile. I knew they were both fuming, and I didn't care one bit. I helped myself to a beer and settled on the sofa to relax. When John returned home, Nadine wasted no time in berating him, her voice carrying through the house. He eventually slipped out, no doubt eager for some peace, and reappeared just in time for dinner. Once the kitchen was cleared, I asked John and Nadine if Brooke and I could have some privacy. Nadine threw me a disdainful look before she and John went to the living room. Brooke's frustration was obvious. She wasn't going to make this easy. "First things first, Brooke," I began, keeping my tone level. "I'll ask you one more time. Would you consider leaving your job and cutting ties with Ray Goodwin?" She clenched her teeth, clearly holding back. "Don't bring that up again," she snapped. "I'm sick of hearing it, and I won't waste my time even answering you anymore. You know the answer. It's not going to change. Either find something else to say, or get out." I reached for a manila envelope on the chair beside me and took out a legal-sized document. "All right, Brooke, I've asked you at least 10 times over the past 2 months, and you've refused every time. I had no other choice." I held out the papers. "These are divorce papers. All you need to do is sign them and mail them in. I've included a stamped envelope. If you want a lawyer to look them over, feel free." She glared, leaning across the table. "You don't get to divorce me just because you don't like where I work or who I know. If you want out, you'd need a legitimate reason, and you don't have one. I'm not giving up my family or my home just because you can't handle my choices." "Brooke, why did you come here to visit your sister this week?" I asked, my voice calm. "What kind of question is that? You know why I came?" "No, that was just an excuse, and you know it. What was the real reason?" "You tell me, since you're so sure of yourself." "Brooke, why did you and Nadine go to the Family Planning Center on Wednesday?" A heavy silence fell. Brooke started to shift slightly in her chair, her confidence beginning to waver. "I don't know what you're talking about." I leaned forward, speaking slowly. "Then why did you hand the Family Planning Center $800 in cash?" Brooke was silent, staring in my direction, though her gaze seemed distant. It was clear she was feeling uneasy, her expression shifting as she swallowed hard, as if something bitter had settled in her mouth. "Why did you have an appointment at the Family Planning Center for 11 this morning?" I pressed. "What exactly were they going to do for you with the $800 you paid?" "Just stop," she snapped, her anger returning. "You have no idea what you're talking about. It's none of your business why I was there or what I was doing. Brooke, the Family Planning Center does one thing, and we both know it. I had a vasectomy, so why would there even be a need?" She crossed her arms, glaring. "I guess your little operation didn't work like you thought it did. Maybe you need a checkup." I reached for the envelope beside me. "Here are lab results from 2 months ago, last month, and last week. It's all in black and white, no room for doubt. So maybe you could show me the family planning report proving that you're not pregnant?" Her lips tightened. "You really are something, you know that? But this still isn't enough to justify a divorce." "Why don't you just admit it?" I said, my voice calm. "Just admit that you and Ray Goodwin have been involved for the past 6 months. You don't have any proof. I don't have to sit here and listen to you go on about things you know nothing about. You never had any involvement with Ray?" "No," she shot back. "I'm your wife. I haven't been with anyone but you." "Then explain the pregnancy," I said quietly, watching as she bit her lip, clearly at a loss for words. "You didn't get close to him?" "No," she replied, her voice wavering. I pulled a set of photos from the envelope, laying several out in front of her. "How about now?" I asked, setting down pictures of her and Ray together in compromising positions. She looked away, frustration and anger flashing across her face. "You've been spying on me," she finally said, her voice rising. "Sneaking around like this, taking pictures? What kind of husband does that? You make me sick with this petty, underhanded approach." Just then, my phone rang. "Hi, Dad," I said calmly. "Perfect timing. Thanks for calling." I hung up, looking back at Brooke. "What was that about?" she demanded, her tone hard. "Dad's on his way here with your things," I replied. "He'll be here in about 10 minutes. I've had the locks changed at our house. If there's anything we missed, let me know and I'll have it sent down to you." She sat there, saying nothing, her anger simmering under the surface. "Here's the title to your car," I continued, sliding the document across the table. "I've signed it over to you. This envelope holds half of the money from our accounts, about $1,200. I've also arranged visitation with the kids once a week, with an option for an overnight stay each month if you're willing to sign a notarized statement confirming the affair. Brooke sat in silence, processing everything, her face a mixture of resentment and disbelief as reality set in. Oh, and one more thing, I have a DVD I didn't get a chance to show you. It's from your May 10th visit to the Scandia Motel with Ray, I said, gathering the photos. It's 2 hours long, showing everything captured here. I paused. And by the way, I didn't take any of these. I wasn't invested in what you were doing. I just didn't appreciate being taken for a fool. Lastly, here's a keepsake from our marriage. I took the safety pin off my keychain and slid it across the table. What's this supposed to be? She asked. That's the pin I used to poke holes in your condoms over the last 2 months. Did you realize you've used 48 of them in the past 2 weeks alone? Ray's gotten more attention than I could have dreamed of. You miserable, calculating jerk, she retorted. That's the lowest thing I've ever heard. No, the lowest thing is being unfaithful to the person you're married to. I may be what you call me, but you've been unfaithful. Just as an observation, you never once apologized. I don't think you deserve a marriage. Goodbye, Brooke. Enjoy your appointment on Monday. As I walked out, she finally began to cry. Nadine ran in to console her, while John followed me to the porch. What's going on here, Troy? John asked, grabbing my arm. You've been married 14 years. Are you really just throwing it all away? Throwing it away? I asked. John, do you even know why Brooke came here to visit Nadine this week? He looked down, hesitated, then muttered, Sorry, Troy. I'll help unload the truck. 10 minutes later, we'd finished unloading, with Brooke's sobs echoing through the house. I didn't know what she was crying about, and frankly, I didn't care. The following week, both Brooke and Ray lost their jobs at Argus Insurance. Although Brooke refused to sign an affidavit, my lawyer assured me the case was solid without it. After that night, I heard nothing from her. She didn't come to see the children, who didn't seem to mind. They were happily building a bond with Kara. We spent a lot of time together as a family, enjoying our shared interest in koi ponds. We avoided any romantic developments for the time being, unwilling to jeopardize the divorces. 4 months later, both cases were finalized. Brooke didn't contest hers, but Ray fought until the end, ultimately losing the house, investments, and paying a substantial monthly alimony. Just before Christmas, Brooke visited the house with gifts for the kids. I kept things polite, and for the sake of the holiday, we avoided any mention of the divorce or the past. She stayed a couple of hours, then left quietly. After putting the house on the market, I moved in with Kara 2 months later. Ray took a job in Omaha, and Brooke followed. 4 months later, Ray vanished without telling her where he'd gone. Brooke returned to stay with Nadine after John left for a job on the Alaskan pipeline. 2 months later, Nadine received divorce papers from John. As for Kara and me, we're happy. She adores the kids, and they feel the same way about her. We're planning to get married in June and are thoroughly looking forward to this new chapter together. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and hit that subscribe button for more of Love, Lust, Lies.